Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming back for day 2 of our chapters. I promised you that I would introduce you to my dog Bailey at some point. So this is Bailey. Everyone say hi, Bailey. She's going to be with us today while we read the next chapter in our chapter book. So we're going to get right to it, chapter 26, which is titled The Mean Mrs. Jewls. Everybody in Mrs. Jewls thought she was a very nice teacher. They were wrong. There is no such thing as a nice teacher. Do you guys believe that? We'll have to see. If you think you have a nice teacher, then you probably are wrong too. Inside every nice teacher, there is a mean and rotten teacher busting to get out. The nicer the teacher is on the outside, the meaner the teacher is on the inside. As Mrs. Jewls was changing the bulletin board before class, a mean and rotten voice whispered inside her brain. "Give the children lots of busy work today," it said, "and then make them do it over and over again if their handwriting isn't perfect." Mrs. Jewls tried very hard to ignore the voice. She didn't like giving busy work to the children. Instead, she tried to teach them 3 new things every day. She believed that if they learned 3 new things every day, they would eventually learn everything there is to know about everything. There are some classes where the teachers give so much busy work that the children never learn anything. "What do you care if the children learn anything?" asked the mean and rotten voice. "It's not your job to teach them. It's your job to punish them. Keep them in at recess." The bell rang and all the kids scurried to their desks. "We are going to learn 3 new things today," Mrs. Jewls announced. 1. How to make pickles. 2. What is 7 plus 4? And 3. What is the capital of England? All the children paid very close attention. "The capital of England is London," said Mrs. Jewls. 7 plus 4 equals 11, and pickles are made by sticking cucumbers in brine. On her desk, she had a box of cucumbers and a vat of brine for demonstration. "Okay, Joe," said Mrs. Jewls. "How much is 7 plus 4? Joe shrugged. "But I just told you, Joe," said Mrs. Jewls. "Weren't you listening to me?" "I don't know," said Joe. "Okay, who can tell me how pickles are made?" "Yes, Jason." 11! It's 11, Jason declared. Mrs. Jewls frowned. "That's a correct answer," she said. "But unfortunately, I didn't ask the right question for that answer." "Can anyone tell me how pickles are made?" "Yes, Bibi." "In London," said Bibi. "I suppose they make some pickles in London," said Mrs. Jewls. "Okay, let's start again. Calvin, what's the capital of England?" "Could you write England on the board?" asked Calvin. "I can do a lot better when I see the question." So Mrs. Jewls wrote England on the board. "Oh, okay," said Calvin, now that he saw the question. "The capital of England is E." "Yes, that's one capital letter of England," Mrs. Jewls had to admit. "Okay, I'll say it one more time. The capital of England is London." "Isn't that where they make all the pickles?" asked Jenny. "No, they don't make all the pickles in London," explained Allison. "Just 11 of them." "Well, where do they make the rest of the pickles?" asked Stephen. "Be quiet!" shouted Mrs. Jewls. "Well, that does it. You're all staying inside for recess." Everyone stared at her. Mrs. Jewls had never told anyone to be quiet like that. It was against the rules for anyone to yell in class. If you did, you had to write your name on the blackboard under the word discipline. Mrs. Jewls put her hand over her mouth and then took it away quickly. "Oh dear, I'm very sorry," she said. "I don't know what came over me." So she wrote her name on the blackboard under the word discipline. All right, let's stop and make some predictions here. So what do you think is going to happen next? We've seen a lot of the children have to put their name under the word discipline before on the board. What happens when you have to put your name on the board and then put a check and then circle it? A lot of my friends know where they have to go. We'll see if Mrs. Jewls, what happens to her. So Mrs. Jewls put her name on the blackboard under the word discipline. Okay, perhaps you'll learn this lesson better if you write it down, she suggested. Everyone, please take out a piece of paper and a pickle. Everybody laughed at her. Pencil, snapped Mrs. Jewls. I meant to say pencil. It just came out pickle. I didn't know pickles came from pencils, said Jenny. I thought they came from cucumbers. I thought they came from London, said Todd. Mrs. Jewls made an ugly face. Todd, didn't I just tell you to be quiet? She asked. Well, answer me, she demanded. Didn't I tell you to be quiet? Yes, said Todd. How dare you talk back to me, snapped Mrs. Jewls. Didn't I just tell you to be quiet? Todd kept his mouth shut. Well, answer me, she demanded. Todd didn't know what to do. He nodded his head. Keep still, ordered Mrs. Jewls. Now I don't want you to say another word again. Is that clear? Todd just stared at her. Is that clear? She asked again. Yes, Todd said meekly. Mrs. Jewls picked up a ruler and slammed it down on the desk. Mrs. Jewls stared at the 12 inches she held in her hand. Oh my goodness, she said. I'm sorry, Todd. I don't know what's the matter with me today. I don't know what's the matter with me at all. I must have gotten up on the wrong side of the bed this morning. So she put a check on her name under the word discipline. Okay, let me try to make this very simple, she said patiently. If I have 7 cucumbers, and then I get 4 more cucumbers, and then I drop all the cucumbers in brine and take them to the capital of England, what do I have? How many? And where am I? Huh? Said DJ. What? Asked John. Could you write the question on the board, please? Asked Rondi. Be quiet! Mrs. Jewls yelled a third time. In a mocking voice, she said, Could you write the question on the board, please? You kids, you think you are so cute. Well, we'll see how cute you really are. And she picked up the vat of brine from her desk. Okay, let's pause and make some more predictions. She has a big vat of salty vinegar water on her desk. That's what a brine is. So what do you think she's going to do with that? Do you think she's going to pour it on the kids? Do you think she's going to pour it on herself or pour it out the window? What do you think? She picked up the vat of brine from her desk. How would you like it if I poured this all over your heads? You wouldn't be so cute when you're all shriveled up and covered in warts like pickles. And she walked up and down the aisles carrying the pickle juice and glaring at the children. No one dared to make a sound. She stopped next to Leslie. How about you, Leslie? She asked. How would you like pickled pigtails? Leslie trembled and her pigtails wiggled. Well, I'm going to ask you 3 questions, Leslie, said Mrs. Jewls, and if you don't answer them all correctly, I'm going to dump this all over your head. Leslie gulped. Question 1, said Mrs. Jewls. How much is 7 plus 4? Leslie quickly tried to count on her fingers, but she didn't have enough fingers. 11, she guessed. A look of disappointment came over Mrs. Jewls' face. Okay, question 2. What is the capital of England? London? Leslie said nervously. Said Mrs. Jewls. That's right. Okay, question 3. She looked down at the vat of brine she was holding and shook her head. She thought a moment and then smiled. What is the name of my cousin who lives in Vermont? Leslie had no idea, so she just had to take a wild guess. She closed her eyes and said, "Fred Jewls?" "Wrong!" exclaimed Mrs. Jewls, and she raised the vat of brine high above Leslie's head and started to tip it over. Paul jumped out of his seat. Those pigtails had once saved his life. Now it was his turn to return the favor for Leslie. He pushed the vat of brine back to the other way, and he was just trying to push it straight, but he pushed it too hard, and it poured all over Mrs. Jewls' head, drenching her in brine. Paul froze in absolute terror. Mrs. Jewls blinked her eyes. Pickle juice dripped down her face. "Thanks, Paul, for doing that," she said. "I think I needed that." The brine had cured her meanness. She circled her name on the blackboard and sent herself home early on the kindergarten bus. The end. So Mrs. Jewls had to go home early on the kindergarten bus. Isn't that crazy? We'll have to see what happens tomorrow. We'll read chapter 27, Lost and Found. Okay. Let's make some predictions about what this might be about at home. All right. Remember, this is Wayside School is Falling Down by Sachar. See you tomorrow.